Doc Slab Audio on music production and audio engineering. Welcome to Doc Slab Audio and our Insights series. I do believe this is the 16th video in our Insights series, and in this video we want to talk about using audio effects effectively and tastefully, or effectively and tastefully. So it's a pretty complicated subject and a fairly opinionated subject. So first and foremost, you have to remember that there's a lot of opinions on this, and that does not make any of them wrong, and it does not make any of them right. So that's the first concept you have to get through your head. But to do a really nice production that's done really well, that's effective and tasteful, that normally is what you're trying to do. We sometimes do crazy stuff, and when we do crazy stuff, all the rules get thrown out the window, no doubt about it. But when we're not, as we dig around and we say, okay, we're really wanting to look at, audio effects and, what happens with them and what we're doing with them, and really get in there and Google about, using audio effects effectively and using audio effects tastefully to get the end results we're looking for. So, when we get into this, some of the biggest concepts we want to look at is, when we talk about every moment in time is important, and you really need to think about that, that it really becomes apparent that sometimes if we overuse processing and we overuse effects, then it sucks the power out of the effectiveness and the tastefulness of the effect. So if we overuse it and there's too much of it going on, that it loses its power, rather than it just being on the vocal or on the bass or on the drum there for a second or on the guitar for a second for a small moment, or a small transition, or at the end of a transition, or at the beginning of a transition, or in the beginning of a movement or end, or somewhere in the middle, or at some little some little junction as things are moving along through a production, that you start to really micro focus into trying to use them effectively and tastefully, so that it's not a really difficult concept to understand. It's more of it being related to you, so that you really sit down and think about it, that anytime you use any type of audio effect, what is your goal? We talked about in one of the other videos about the power of simplicity, so that whenever you do something really intricate or complicated, or some complex weave, a tapestry of things, that it's not all the time in a lot of productions to give it power. It's like, whoa, dude, just for a moment, that thing. And sometimes audio effects can have that same effect for a small moment. It's like, whoa, that is really cool. Or, in various degrees of, whoa, that was kind of cool. Off to the left side there, off to the right side, or somewhere in the center. What was that? It's like, what was that? That was kind of cool, Oh, yeah. And it's like, and you want it to have that effect, but not draw so much away from the production and the power of the production by using it too much, or not tastefully, or not effectively. So it's just something you really want to think about, so that when you're going along through a production, whether or not, sometimes you have like single tracks, right? And you're trying to figure out if you're going to use effects on them. Does that make sense? And sometimes it's really hard until you really get mixing, like we talked about, in my last master series about, templates and sessions and having things set up in stages so that you can really get things laid out and go, no, right there at the beginning of that movement, that the vocal, I want to put this vocoder on there and I want to go, yeah, and then when I go, and it's like, well, that is so cool right there. Yeah, dude. There's some simple thing like that, and not overusing it to where it takes away from the power. It's adding a little bit of spice, just at one moment. And then it's getting back to the production and letting the performance and the message or whatever you're trying to do there, speak for itself. And you're just adding a little bit of spice here and there, tastefully and effectively. And it's monumental because anytime you use anything like a vocoder effect for a little part or, some echo effect at the end of a vocal or a guitar, wow, 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 wow. Anything you might be doing, a little bit of chorus or flanger right in the middle of the vocals, like, and then I want to go, and it's just for a second, back into ba, 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 whatever, that, it's used effectively and tastefully and used well, so sometimes it's an art form in itself, which sometimes takes, it's a collaboration of the artist and the engineer, depending how good of an artist you're dealing with or producer you're dealing with, to be able to, inflict that on the audio and do some cool stuff that's really tasteful and really effective in adding some difference, but enhancing things, but not detracting from it and, overpowering it. I mean, it's an art form in itself. So you just really need to look at it that way. So whenever you're going through and you're thinking you might want to use effects, use them sparingly, use them effectively, and use them tastefully. That is my best advice, because the more you look at it as some kind of spice you're just throwing on here or there, or you're adding some kind of effect, you got a transition where the drum is all of a sudden, it's like, and then the thing's going along and it's this drum, and the drum's going to go and you're going to add this echo effect or this flanger, this distortion to it or something, whatever you're doing there, that you really take time whenever you're using effects and spend time there, because it's huge, and the effect that it can have is very powerful on the listen if done well. If you use effects not effectively and not tastefully, it's going to have a negative impact on the listener, because they're going to go, what is that? Immediately. Most listeners, you may not be dealing with brainiacs all the time, but they know what they like, and they know that you better know how to do that stuff and use it effectively and tastefully and do it correctly, right? So it really is one of those things that is a study unto itself. If you really sitting down, any type of effects you have in your DAW or you've purchased or anything like that, to really sit down with them going, what can I use that for? How can I use that effectively, tastefully, sparingly, to add impact or, help, make things more subtle and help the wash in the background. There's all kinds of different degrees and levels of that. Sometimes we use it for very powerful effects, and sometimes it's very subtle, that adds a little bit of texture, a little bit of difference that's very hard to discern what exactly is happening there, but it's obvious that something is going on there that is an effect, but it's used so sparingly that it's just adding a little bit of, something, what I'm saying? And it's an art form, using your effects tastefully and effectively, that you really need to sit down and see that anytime you're using them, that it's an artistic endeavor. And it's like using any kind of a paint on a palette whenever you're painting, that it's another color, what you're doing with it, how you do it. Most effects have multiple facets to them, and they can do maybe very similar effects but differently, that can affect the performance and affect the production on a whole a lot differently depending on how you use them, right? And we always get back to, you can use effects for things that nobody ever thought to use them for. Why would you use that effect to do that? But it has this really wild effect, or it does something really strange. And sometimes you can combine effects to do different things. You might have, whatever effect and whatever effect and whatever effect that are working together with automation, all kinds of things to overlap, interweave, and you do really wild tapestries of effectual mixtures, that, come out as this really wild thing that, just for a moment or a small moment or a transition or just, for a break or something or one drum hit, whatever it might be, right? And it's really an art form that you really need to see that way. And it's something you should spend some time really studying about and really, getting into your DAW and really looking at them that way, Googling around and studying about it and really trying to see it that way so that you can really use any effects that you do use very effectively, very tastefully, sometimes subtly, sometimes not, but well. Does that make sense? So anytime you pull out effect, you know exactly what you're trying to do. You might be experimenting a little bit, but you got a pretty good idea. You're trying to, help something, bigger than life, or add some texture to it that's unreal. That's just unreal, and that's not real. But I'm going to add this, different element into what's going on there to add this unreal, surreal element to what's happening, and how that's going to affect the rest of the mix, how it's working with the rest of the mix, what you have to do to make it work properly so that it's heard, or it's very subtle in the background that, is, just adds some kind of ambience or texture or flavor or something going on. And it's something you really need to sit down and do, because I've found that it's huge. Using effects that way is going to make them have a much bigger impact on the listener and the production if you do that. Does that make sense? That way that it's, has an effect, right? And it's not just some stuff going on, that it's very purposeful, it's very distinct, and it ends up having this effect of causing what you want to happen, rather than just some stuff going on or some, crap that's filling up the background or something behind the vocals or something like that. That it's really having a dramatic effect on the production and causing something else to happen, which can be, sometimes it's, making things sound, unreal and surreal, in a moment, or you've got something that's, very techno, or, rock, country, EDM, R&B, whatever it might be, and you're just adding this flavor in there. Or you might be doing pop, where it might be real prominent to have things like that happening a lot now and then. But don't overkill. Don't kill the production with your effects. Don't overuse them and overprocess, and use them effectively and tastefully so that it has the desired effect of affecting the listener as something unique and different is going on, and it's been done really well by somebody who is a good engineer and a good producer. So peace, self-love. I certainly hope you enjoyed this next video on using effects tastefully and effectively, and I will see you in the next video.